And in that land acknowledgement, I'll be speaking about a variety of different things. And I want everybody to understand that although this cannot fully embrace and capture all of the trauma and tragic history that has impacted our indigenous peoples here, I do not do this in any way that should be interpreted as being a superficial attempt to acknowledge what's going on and acknowledge the past as we go forward. That being said, in accordance with the spirit of Sankofa, Sankofa is that African Adinkra symbol of a bird with its head turned backwards. It means to return and or go back and fetch it. We embrace our ancestors, elders, and the extended community as valuable teachers within the community, as all people contribute to the reservoir of meaning that humanity draws upon for substance. The community helps us to understand the past so it can benefit our present, future, and unborn. Black Lives Matter School at New Paltz operates within this tradition of looking back to give back. Join us as we continue our weeks, months, and year of action. We run February to February, then do it again, all right? Naming the land. As all human beings are descendants of those first peoples in Africa to populate this planet over 200,000 years ago, knowledge of this fact helps us all to understand our common ancestors, our common conditions as social beings, and ultimately our common reality. Accordingly, all communities, without exception, in part owes its being, vivacity, and limitations to the extensive generations of ancestors that have contributed to our individual and communal lived realities. Throughout human history, this has in part been expressed as a series of relationships that have manifested themselves in this very moment, as all things one does and does not do impacts all others at all times. On this land, many were brought against their will. On this land, others came in search of opportunities, and on this land, still others have lived here as managers, cultivators, and cousins of the earth. Facts are not fake news. The truth both hurts and heals, but the well-being of any individual or community is in part rooted in self-reflection, critical thinking, and the establishment of solidarity across ethnicities, solidarity across races, solidarity across genders, sexual orientations, class, and even organization. In many ways, solidarity is mutual respect. Solidarity is just. Solidarity is healthy. Solidarity is sustainable. I want to start by acknowledging what has been buried, by honoring the truth. We are standing on the ancestral lands of the Esopus and Lenape people. We pay respect to their ancestors, elders, youth, and unborn. Our gathering here today is in part due to the relationships that we have to traditions of violence that unjustifiably have taken lives. We are participating in disrupting, displacing, and decentering these marginalizing lived realities of human beings. Your work and our work is also in part due to our efforts at truth-telling with the intent of making uncomfortable spaces more comfortable and co-creating liberational spaces by the amplification of voices, alignment of purpose, and an acknowledgement of difference. Shall we never forget.
Thank you so much, Anthony, and we are grateful again for this space that we are allowed to exist in. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Dr. Paula C. Perez. I am an adjunct lecturer here at the SUNY New Paltz campus in the Graduate School of Education. I'm an author, a speaker, do a million things on the outside, but wanted to bring together one of my groups, the Educator of Color Network, to have a conversation around what it feels like, what it is like to be in predominantly white spaces. What are those inner struggles? So we're going to start by having our panelists introduce themselves, and then we're going to jump right into the questions. So on this evening, I want to welcome one of our New Paltz students. Maya, introduce yourself, please.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Maya Leslie. I am the only pre-service teacher on this panel today, but I am a student at SUNY New Paltz. I am an education major with a concentration in Black Studies. So I'm really excited to be here and to chat with you all. And so I'm going to pass it off to Miss Tanisha Parker.
Thank you, Maya. Hi, everyone. My name is Tanisha Parker. I am a high school special education teacher at Valley Central High School. This is my 15th year in special education. I started with the New York City Department of Education, moved to California, and now I'm back in New York. I'm excited to be here and to join this conversation. And I will pass the mic over to Noelia.
Hello, my name is Noelia Santiago. I am an English teacher currently teaching 9th and 10th grade at Ellenville Central School District. This is my 18th year teaching, and I taught 16 of those years in the Bronx. I am also very excited to be here. It was a big change for me, and finding this group of educators has really been helping me in the past 2 years. So I'm going to pass it over to Marcia Cotton.
Unmute yourself, Marcia.
Sorry. Hello, everyone. I'm Marcia Cotton. A great pleasure to be here. I am also an educator. I have been teaching preschool, early elementary ed since 1997. I have been teaching private schools in the city and here in the Mid-Hudson Valley, and I am presently working at Poughkeepsie Public Schools. I am a dual language pre-K teacher, and I have been navigating the public school system for many years, in and out, and I have to say that this is the first time that I feel so happy in a public school position. Thank you for being here.
And last but certainly not least, Dr. Ford.
Hi, good night, everyone. My name is Dr. Elizabeth Ford. I am an assistant professor at SUNY Newport. I started last August. It is indeed a pleasure to be part of this space, this Education of Color space. Very supportive, and it's helping me, as Noelia says, to make that transition. I teach mostly the math and the STEM methods courses at SUNY. And I've been looking forward to this panel discussion for some time now.
Well, we have some fabulous panelists on this evening, so we're going to jump right into it. The first question that comes to mind is talking about our topic. As educators of color, what have been the inner struggles that you have dealt with in your various spaces? So we'll jump in. Noelia, why don't you start us?
Sure. When I was thinking about this question, it kind of separated into two struggles. One being the larger, more like philosophical struggle that I've had my entire career, I would say, about trying to figure out who I am in a system, right? Like that struggle of, am I just a cog in this system? Is there any way that I can make any kind of progress being such a small little part of this larger system that we know was created and is sustained by a lot of negative things? You know, I want to say white supremacy, but so like that larger philosophical question of, am I making an impact? Is my impact enough to be in this for 30, 35, 40 years? But then there's the small day today. So that's like the larger frame. But then the day-to-day struggle for me, especially moving from a place like the Bronx and now working in the Hudson Valley, is taking on that struggle every day of teaching adults, which you would think, right, you're a teacher, so you should be used to that, and that's fine. But it's different when it's your colleagues and when you feel like, or I feel like, I'm being put in a position where I have to teach that every day to adult people. And it weighs heavy, right? When you're one of 3 people of color, or one of, if you're lucky, maybe 5 people, to always be put in that position, to have to speak up, to have to be uncomfortable, or to have to hold it in and just sit there and say, this is not the time or the place. So for me, it's that combination of that larger framework and then also those day-to-day reminders of maybe everyone doesn't think you belong here,
Wow. Tanisha, what do you think?
I definitely agree with everything that Noelia shared. I believe that there are also a lot of like implicit bias things happening in the schools. So everything may not be intentional, but I think that there is definitely a lack of training and a lack of exposure to inclusive environments. So people kind of sit in their comfortable spaces. And so when, a person like me comes in who's well-traveled, I've worked in a lot of different schools, and I have a lot of different ideas and things. Like, I think that there is a struggle, and especially like I teach English special education, so like the books that we're reading, things that that I've seen that work for my students that I know will help them. It's just been a struggle with getting everyone on board, because it's like, no, this makes me feel uncomfortable. So, I get a lot of pushback in that way.
Maya being the only student on here, what are your thoughts?
I also agree with what everyone has said. I don't personally have experience being an educator and being in actively teaching, but I will say that as a student in education, one of my major struggles throughout my entire education has been the representation of educators of color in my education. I have never had an educator, a Black educator, or an educator of color for that matter. And so it really has affected the way that I the way I perceive education and being someone who wants to go into education and eventually become a teacher. It is tough for me to only have experiences learning from white individuals or individuals who aren't prioritizing Black narratives or seeing that aspect of education. So I'd say that's my main struggle, of not having that representation of people that I can look up to and see a version of myself in.
Wow, excellent. Dr. Ford.
I'm glad I came after Maya, because it kind of segues into what I have been thinking about in terms of my inner struggles. Of course, I'm going to give it from a teacher educator's perspective. I've prioritized my thoughts, and it's in sync with what Maya just said, in the sense that SUNY Newport is the first institution that I have been to that is predominantly white. So it was a transition for me. And one of the first inner struggles I had was, working with a population of students who my student body was the low population of colored individuals. So that's an inner struggle that I am working on, or I have been pondering on. And then it led me to some inner questions. I'm asking, how can I create in my current teacher educators an awareness, as well as the criticality of facilitating, learning experiences of individuals, of students of color who they will have in their classrooms. Another struggle that I have is, how can I nurture my teacher educators to become caring educators for all students? And how can I help them to my teacher educators to embrace a growth mindset with respect to high expectation for all their students. And after pondering, on those questions, I gave myself, I call it a self-appointed task, where how can I effectively equip my teacher candidates to work with diverse student population. So that's my task. I'm going to teach math, I'm going to teach STEM, I'm going to teach methods, I'm going to teach pedagogy, but the overarching task is how can I equip my teacher candidates to work with students of all population.
Boy, you all are sparking so many questions in my mind. Marcia, I love that you have found this space where you feel comfortable, where you are happy. What has attributed to that?
Okay, so when I say happy, not necessarily. So I definitely identify with Noelle said and what Tanisha said. I definitely have similar experiences like that, but I still have them. So when I said I'm happier now is because I really love the population that I'm serving. And I have done a lot of learning prior this position. So my struggles has been very similar to Noelia and Tanisha, like finding myself, like the connection in questioning myself, do I belong here? And believing in myself that I do belong to in that space, and also that I am causing some impact, because for me, for many years, I questioned myself, do I belong here? What kind of impact am I really creating in this space? So it has taken me many years, and it has taken me many in and out of the public school system, because I struggle how children are taught. I struggle with the treatment and receiving of children of color particularly, and the lack of developmentally appropriate practice in teaching. So I struggle with that. So I've been in and out of that, but also finding myself that I am connected to that community. And one of the things that has happened to me in the last few years, I started the social justice education program in SUNY New Paltz. And I have to say, it has been a life-changing experience for me. I have learned the strategies. I have gained so many tools and experiences throughout the program that I have become a more confident educator, really believing in myself, and having those tools and skills to be able to connect to the people that I know are doing the work, that are there to support the students, that are there to support one another. So that has really changed the way I feel today. So it has been a long journey, and it's not, it hasn't ended. It continues, because I still do struggle. I work in a very diverse, racially, economically diverse district in Poughkeepsie, but still the staff, the teacher body is still predominantly white. I am 3 out of, I don't know how many teachers, only 3 of us are teacher of color, 2 Black teachers, and I'm consider myself a woman of color, Hispanic, Latinx. So only the 3 of us, and that was a shock for me. But there I am. I feel like more than ever, I have a purpose to be in that space. But it continues to be a struggle, because there's little conversation about equity and inclusion and cultural competency. So the work continues on.
Marcia, I'm sorry to keep coming back to you, but give us one of the tools that you took away from your program that has been effective or helpful for you to navigate in these predominantly white spaces?
So to me, one of them is that we are always making impact. It might be this little, and it might be just with that student. Before I went to a school, a district, and I thought I was going to change everything. But now I know that when I'm there present with that student and I'm giving the very best of me and I am treating that student with respect and dignity like they deserve, right there, I'm making an impact. And another thing that I learned was how to find my people that I know would be there for me. So that's another thing that I have learned, how to connect with people. And it has been really, really priceless. It's life-changing.
That is awesome. Would you all just jump in? One thing that I keep hearing as a subtext is purpose. Is purpose. You have talked about the need to have impact. Someone jump in and talk about that from your lens. Why is that so important? And I'm sorry if there's someone in the chat, Anthony's asking questions and I'm not able to read and whatever. So if there's someone that has a question, Anthony, I'll let you jump in and ask the questions or call on people. So for our panel, impact. Why is that so important?
This is Tanisha Parker. The reason why impact is so important, and especially, I speak a lot about literacy and the books that I choose to have in my classroom. The reason why it's so important is because I understand personally how much it can change someone's perspective, how much the trajectory of someone's life can be changed on a lesson that I have in my classroom. Personally, even in high school, my experiences, I have taken things that were positive to implement in my classroom currently. So I'm hoping to give my students those experiences to help them develop open minds and to be well-rounded individuals. So the impact, because it's so lifelong, and students, they become adults and we're always learning. So adults are students as well. And I think that for lifelong learners, it's important for us to make sure that we're putting our best foot forward and giving information that will be effective for them for a lifetime.
Excellent. Anyone else? Maya, were you going to jump in?
I'll jump in real quick. I just think in my experience, having an educator of color has, like, kind of what Tanisha said, like, has a lifelong effect. Like, since coming to New Paltz, it was my first experience ever having an educator of color who actually is here today. Shout out Anthony Dandridge. But it has absolutely changed the way that I view myself and my education in a way that it's centered around my experiences. And so I am able to connect with not only the material in like an academic way, but also take it outside of the classroom in a way that I am becoming much more involved in the community, in society. I'm becoming more involved in my own mental health wise, in terms of acknowledging being Black, and being Black is okay, and being a Black educator is awesome, and seeing people who represent those roles in my life. So kind of just, again, to what Tanisha said about like the lifelong learning process. So it's really helped me to just prioritize and value my own education as it's like ongoing. I'm appreciating every part of it, not just in a way that I need a degree, but in a way that it's affecting my day-to-day life.
Representation does matter. It does matter. Our students need to see people in places of authority, in places of influence that look like them, Noelle, you talked about the system, having to navigate the system. Why do you feel such a weight in terms of trying to change the system?
Similar to some other people's experiences here, I grew up in the Bronx, New York, one of the most diverse places in the world. And when I was growing up, every single educator I had was a white person. And some of them were strong educators and some of them weren't, but I didn't even realize the impact of that until I was older. I remember, and as an English teacher, so like literature always sticks out to me. I remember the first book I read by a Latina was In the Time of the Butterflies in the 11th grade. And I read that book and I was on the train and I started bawling, crying. I had never felt a book like that in my life. And I love books. I love Shakespeare and I love The Great Gatsby but when I read that story of those hermanas dominicanas, those Dominican sisters, it touched me in a way that no other book in my life, right? And so I always think back, I want to give those experiences to my students. And I think, I'm sorry, my dog is barking back there. My husband's trying to shut her up. But, I think I sometimes get caught up in the despair, not to sound dramatic, but I think, I've been doing this for 18 years and you have these moments of, what am I doing? You sit in a meeting and somebody says something and you're like, I should pack my bags and leave. Like, you have so many of those moments when people tell you, you can't read that book. That book isn't appropriate. So I think for me, it's always a battle navigating, am I doing enough? What else can I do? And also the self-care bit, like to what extent do I also have to protect my own emotional well-being, psychological well-being? I think a lot of my colleagues might not have that issue where I'm constantly self-talking of like, it's okay, don't say it right now, wait until you're, it weighs so heavily every second. I don't think people who I work with, who are great people, who like me, who we go out to dinner, I don't think they understand that mental struggle that I have every single staff meeting, every single English department meeting. But it's real and it's there. So, I know we're sharing our struggle, but like some of the things I've been learning lately to kind of combat some of that despair is, that idea of self-care as resistance. And I think it's so important for teachers because we already have the student stories that weigh heavy on us. Like that's a whole other aspect. So like for me to be there 100% for my kids, I have to be there for me and I can't forget that part of it. So.
Boy, Noelle, you said so many things. I also remember the first time I put my hand on a book that didn't even represent my life. It was a Black girl in Harlem, but I picked up a book when I was 11 years old called The Soul Brother and Sister Lou. And I will never forget that experience. We need to see ourselves within the pages of the material that we are sharing with our students. And then you talk about the need for self-care, especially post-COVID. My heart goes out to educators. What are you all doing to take care of yourself? Because it is a struggle. You feel like you're going to war every day. So what do you do to remember why you're doing this and to keep going, to show up fully the next day? Anyone can jump in.
I can say something. So one of the things that helps me to keep sane, it's my family, the connection that I have with my children, my husband, and also some of my extended family. So, and some great supportive friends. So that definitely helps. I have done some meditation on very stressful times. Walking and connecting with nature really helps. And so that keeps me healthy mentally and emotionally, because as Noelle said, it's such a weight every day when you have to be in a space that you are socialized to question yourself. And you are always dealing with things that you know are harmful to yourself and your student, and that struggle to be able to stand up for yourself and your students. So definitely our health, putting our health first is number one, because we can only do but so much if we're not healthy. And ultimately too, my students keep me going back and giving me that energy and that desire to be in that space. And I know earlier, some of you talked about representation in children, students seeing us as people of color, seeing themselves enough. And I have to tell you, it's with my students, but when I walk the hallways in my classroom and I see another class in line and I see a little brown girl looking at me and a smile, or a little boy, and I don't know if I'm exaggerating, but I just that presence, in that I'm looking at them, in that I'm smiling at them, and I'm letting them know I see you, and I see you, the whole you. I think just that alone makes such a great impact in children. And to me, it's just like, at the end of the day, when I have communicated with the families of my students in Spanish, and for them to know that I'm there and that they can communicate and they can advocate for their children. So that presence and that connection, to me, that's I take that home, that satisfaction that I am there, fully there for my students. But at the same time, we need to find ways to take care of ourselves, because the work is really emotionally and psychologically draining.
Anyone else want to jump in on that? Go ahead, Noelia.
Yeah, I'll just share some. One is joining this group. I mean, I can't tell you, it feels really alone. When I first started, I felt really, really alone. And I went to that. I got the courage, because right now I'm on tenure. So I got the courage to ask the principal if I could go to the New Paltz multicultural conference. People were like, don't ask that. But I was like, I really want to go. And just having that moment that we had at last year's lunch, and people being in tears and just talking about just feeling that you're not alone. I think that's really, really key. And being able to talk about it, that's important. And then another thing that really helps me, this might sound crazy, is I will YouTube people who are fighting the good fight. I can't tell you how many times I've repeated Bettina Love's podcast, because they fill me with hope. So, I'll rewatch her and Goldie Muhammad having a conversation, and then I feel better about what I'm doing. So I think always, and reading, because obviously I'm an English teacher. So like reading words and feeling that there are many educators like me fighting the good fight, and it makes you feel hope. So that's what I do.
Let me jump in there, and thank you for bringing that up. For those of you that didn't know, on last year at the multicultural conference that New Paltz does every year, thank God, I suggested to the organizers that they allow me to have space for educators of color to come and just break bread together. And it was so healing, that moment. And out of that was birthed our Educator of Colors Network, which we meet on a monthly basis. So if anyone is interested, drop me a note in the chat and I'll get back to you. Our next meeting is next Monday at 6:45. So if you're interested in joining us, and then we have another group that's specifically for Black school administrators. So that's the Black School Administrators Roundtable. But all of that talks about the need for affinity spaces. We need spaces where we can come and authentically be ourselves. Somebody talk about the mask that we have to wear.
I mean, I've talked about this with our group before, but I'll just bring it up because for me, for many, many years in school, and it's about my accent, my voice, the sound of my voice. My husband always jokes. He's like, well, if you're driving down the street, maybe they'll let you slide, but as soon as you start talking, they're gonna know who you are and where you're from. And it's something that when I was in the Bronx, you know, a lot of people talk and sound like me, but being here, when I went away to college and when I'm standing in front of a classroom and I'm student teaching, and I student taught up in Oswego, that's where I went to college. So immediately people will make comments about my accent. Where's your accent from? Where are you? And really is an attempt to other me, like really, you know, to identify the fact you are other and where are you from? Like, what is this mystique? And, you know, I've told you guys, I always say my accent is American. My accent is American. It's a Bronx, New York accent, and that's what it is. But for many, many years, I remember like being so conscious of the way I would pronounce words. And it, like I said, it's exhausting. The one that is the number after 2, like my tongue says 3 and it's 3. And I remember saying it in my head, 3, so that I would say it in a way that other people found okay or whatever. So for me, that's always been like a mask, like repeating words in my head, making sure I'm pronouncing them. I'm not going to say correctly because I'm too grown to say that, but the way people want me to pronounce them. And I interviewed at tons of schools. And one of the things I think always didn't get me the job was when, as an English teacher, they would ask me about grammar. And I'd be like, okay, here we go. I'm not getting hired, because I'd say, grammar is a tool of oppression. And then it was like, okay, we'll call you, bye. But that's, for me, when I think of mask, I always think of my voice, my accent. And I'm trying to release that. I'm working on that. Because at the end of the day, I teach in Ellenville and the kids and the parents sound just like me. So.
Exactly. Dr. Ford, what mask are you wearing?
In terms of, I don't even know if you call it a mask, but the fact that you always try to be, you have no malintent, but you try to always be politically correct with what you say. And even the examples that you use for fear of offending others when that's not your intention. So that's the only thing that I sort of tread lightly on when it comes to, yeah, depending on the space I'm in. How do I, you know, say what I have to say, but also be politically correct in saying it by not offending others and so.
Excellent. Tanisha, did you want to jump in on that? What mask do you feel like you've had to wear?
Definitely when I moved to California, it was just a different environment than I was used to. So I felt that I was very quiet. So I was kind of silenced in a way where like I didn't want to, like others have said, like step on any toes, say the wrong thing, ask questions when I was confused, because I just felt that there was already like a stereotype being aligned with me and who I was just based on my appearance. And so
speak to some of those stereotypes. What stereotype?
So some of the stereotypes were like, because, well, coming from New York, so like one of the secretaries said like, oh, you know, like I thought you would be dressed in all black, and like, oh, like, can you speak with a Brooklyn accent? It was just a lot. Like, so yeah, like how I spoke, how I dressed, how I presented myself. They assumed that I would be like loud, and, you know, my name is Tanisha. So like there were, you know, things that went with those types of things. So they were expecting someone different than who I was personally, but I wasn't a quiet individual personally, but I just, when I saw that, I was like, whoa, you know, and I felt that the mask was just, I started to silence myself. And I was a lot younger when I moved to California. So in those experiences, I actually grew or started to have a bigger voice, but in a different way. I put myself in different positions to share my opinions and platforms and things like that. But it was a struggle for a long time because I was like, how do I address this?
What I'm hearing are the microaggressions.
Yes. And actually the school, the district that I was at, they were sued for some racial things that they were doing to the students. And a part of the lawsuit was that they had to train all of the teachers and all of the staff in implicit bias. And they actually flew someone from New York to California to hold that workshop. And I was thinking like, wow, like we don't have anyone, you know, in the state of California to hold this workshop. It was just a question that, you know, but it was the level of comfort. Like people didn't feel comfortable holding that workshop in that space because they knew what the environment was. So they flew someone out from New York.
That's
Yeah.
unreal. That
Yeah.
is unreal.
It was a lot.
So how do we encourage our white allies to help educators of color to be able to be successful in their work environments? What's something we can share that would be of help? Because there's a lot of people on here. And after this question, we're going to open it up in case there's any people in the audience that have a question. But what can we share from our own experience that has been helpful so that we can do our jobs successfully?
For me, it's been like them speaking up when other coworkers come to them with things that are inappropriate. Just speaking up and saying, hey, like that's not okay, or educating them instead of it getting as far as to getting to me and me having to educate them. So speaking up is a big one for me.
I love that. Silence to us says agreement. If you're not speaking up on behalf of us, we're feeling like, oh, they must feel that way too. Anybody else? Comments? Dr.
Sorry, Dr.
Go
Perez.
ahead, Marcia.
So similarly to what Tanisha said, one of the things that I find my bravery to speak up whenever something is said that I know it's not that it's not fair, that it could be racist. But the way I do it is I don't call people out. I call people in. I have learned to do that because I am not looking for a confrontation. I am looking for people to listen to me and yes, educate, but at the same time, I am learning that I don't have to be constantly educating white people because it's there, it's real. They have to do the work too. They have to educate themselves. They have to find the truth. So I am speaking up, but I'm also trying not to traumatize myself. So I am doing just the part that I need to do. I am not going to do the work for other people because it's there. And if they don't want to believe my story, that's, I can't continue to tell you, this is what's happening to me. This is my experience. And so that's another learning that I have done. But again, you have to use your intelligence, you have to use your social emotional skills to really get to know people and to see who are those people that you can ally with them, that they can become your allied in the work that you're doing, in making this environment a place where it's more inclusive and more welcoming of you, and more in that they value and appreciate who you are. So so I think really finding those people, it's very important. And you would know, you would know if you can trust them, and also distinguishing the type of relationship that you can have with different people, because you might have a really connecting deep relationship with somebody and then you can't with the other person. So I think it takes a lot of social emotional intelligence to do that. And we have gone through so much and go through so much, and I think those skills are really well developed.
Marcia, that's another example of self-love, being able to take care of yourself. And I like what you said about it's not your job to educate other people. If you want to know, the information is out there. You just need to take time and research and read. And then not just read, apply what you've read, do what you've heard will work and is needed for your educator of colors, your coworkers. So let's open it up. Let's see if there's any questions. Anthony, do you have any questions for us?
There is a question. Are we opening up for a person to ask the question themselves?
Whatever.
Gotcha. So I'm gonna let Jody Clark ask her question, but I would like to make a comment real quick. I'm going to take my moderator's license and make a 35-second comment as it relates to getting other folk involved. I think that is one thing I do in my own pedagogy, is for us to understand that it takes a village. It takes a village to raise a child, African proverb, so the child can raise the village. To that extent, it speaks about how we are always in community as we walk through this world, and nobody is exempt of responsibility for the well-being of others. No person at any time. So some people may be a little bit more responsible or accountable for helping folk, but everybody has some level of responsibility. And if we recognize that, like Martin Luther King, paraphrasing him, says that our destinies are tied together. Right. Everybody needs to recognize that everybody plays a significant role in terms of the things that we do and we don't do. That being said, I'm gonna stop right there. Sister Jody Clark, a student of ours, has a question for another student of ours, Maya Leslie.
Okay.
Hi, Maya, how are you? I just want to say thank you for your perspective. And what you have expressed is reflective of my experience and a lot of experiences of students of color on SUNY New Paltz campus. So this is the reason why we created a student group called Future Teachers of Color. It aims to address BIPOC students' needs and representation. And we also offer support and advocacy. So my question is, apart from the lack of professor representation, do you find representation in networks within your classmates, or do you feel isolated?
I would say I feel very isolated in terms of my classrooms. Very often in my education classes, I am the only or one of two Black students in the class. And I find myself sometimes, which I feel shameful about sometimes, but sometimes like holding my tongue in situations where I know that what I want to say matters and should be said in a sense, but I don't feel that it is like a safe enough or collaborative enough space to be able to express those feelings. Sometimes being because I don't want to have to be the only advocate for the Black community, but also in some cases because I am focused on my peer relationships and building that foundation of educators or pre-educators. And sometimes I feel like I don't want to be isolated from them. And so that's something that I have struggled with a bit. And in terms of the way that our educators facilitate opportunities to like collaborate with other people, I've met so many amazing and stunning pre-service educators in my classes, but I have yet to make a close relationship with a person of color in that sense. And I think that I haven't thought about it much because I'm just entering in being able to experience educators of color. So having students of color, pre-service educators in my class is not something that I'm expecting because I'm like, oh my gosh, I have a Black teacher, so I'm not really thinking about that. But I think it would be awesome if our education program could do something about just making sure that we are reaching and seeing our students of color who are in education and hearing their voices consistently in classrooms and making sure that their ideas aren't being diminished because you're in a classroom full of other white students.
Can anyone else speak to, a lot of times we think about students, but often we're the only educators of color. We're one of two, one of three. How difficult has it been for you to speak up? Full transparency, I had a very difficult time. And I think that's why I'm so free now. When I was in a system, not that I didn't speak up, but I'm certainly not bound now. And I think it comes from the fact that the system can't do anything to me. But what happens when you're on a tenure track and you need to be approved by your peers? What happens when, you get complaints from white students that say you're grading unfairly because you have high expectations? How do you deal with all of that? Whoever wants to jump in.
May I take up 20 seconds real quick? So we have panels, 20 seconds real quick. A student asked me a similar question today in class. What about the consequences of speaking up? And I try my best to be transparent as I engage issues of race and racism in all my classes, teaching from in a Black Studies department. And this is what I did with my students today. I said, listen, at the end of the day, it's going to be an individual decision. I can't tell you what decision you need to make, right? I know how I walk through the world, and that's right for me. But at the end of the day, it's consequences for everything you do and you don't do, and you're going to have to live with speaking up or not speaking up. And that's how I left it there. But hopefully that opened up some space for somebody else to chime in.
I was just going to say, for me, and I think you're right, Professor, that it is very personal and everyone's circumstances aren't the same. I'm a mother, I have a family, I'm the breadwinner of my household. I have to navigate things perhaps in a different way. But for me professionally, and actually a student asked a similar question at last year's New Paltz event, a very astute student. And I said, for me personally, I draw the line when a child is being harmed. So if someone says something that is, I'm an adult, I can walk away. Yes, I have responsibilities, but I have a full master's degree. I can quit and get a job somewhere else. But if they're the child in my classroom, right, where I have to be the source of power there and they're being harmed, for me, that's a personal line. I have to say something. Whether it's an adult that's doing it, whether it's a child, whether it's a staff member, that's for me where I feel I can't let it go if a child is being harmed. And I say this on the first day of school to my students. When I say harmed, I mean physically, emotionally, psychologically, in any of those ways. That for me is when I have to speak, let the consequences be what they may, which is interesting because I'll let a lot of things slide if it's hurting me. but if it's a child, I have to draw the line there.
Excellent. Anyone else want to jump in on that one?
I have to say that similarly to Noelia, I'm sorry, I have had some experience like that where the students come first, no matter what. Right now, I am navigating a relationship because I am in this program. It's a dual language program. We have 2 classrooms, a pre-K. I am one of the pre-K Spanish teacher, and then there's a kindergarten class. And so there is this team when we get together. So there are 2 new teachers, myself, non-tenure, and the other Spanish teacher who's also new and non-tenure. And then we have 2 white teachers who have been in the district for many years and have a lot of power. And when we have our team meeting with the administrators of the dual language program, they tend to take all the space, all the time to talk. This seem like what they have to say is more important than everyone else. And so I'm navigating that, and in a very diplomatic way, or perhaps not diplomatic, but respectful way, I try to disrupt that behavior and let them know that I also have something to say. I also have something important to contribute. And one of the things that I have learned to do is from the very beginning, from initial meetings, like having what you call a check-in to see how people are doing. And so opening that space, making people comfortable that everyone can chime in and say how they feel, anything that may not be related to the work that we have gathered to do, but then just making it more comfortable for everyone. And in many ways, I have expressed like, we all have to have a turn to speak, and that. So as they say, don't take space, give space. So that's one of the things that I'm trying to, that I learned in my program at SUNY New Paltz, that I'm trying to teach others, because what is knowledge good for if you don't share it? So that's something that I do to navigate these relationships.
Very good, very good. Does anyone else want to comment on that? I have another question if not. We are facing a time where we seem to be seeing fewer and fewer educators of color. We're not seeing students going into education. What do you think we might be able to do to remedy that problem? Maya?
I was going to say Karima Brown looks like she has something to say.
Oh, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, Karima.
Good evening, everyone. It's so great to hear all the comments and the discussion. I'm so happy to be here. I am a former student of Dr. Perez. I did want to make one comment because the theme has come of needing more educators of color. There is a program that's called Today's Students, Tomorrow's Teachers, which is a nonprofit organization that's designed to recruit, train, and mentor future educators beginning in secondary education, meaning middle school and high school. I'm a product of it. I'm over 10 years in the profession. I've excelled, and not to make it about me, but this program was designed for this reason specifically that we're talking about. I'll drop the link in the chat as well as my email, because I still am very involved with the program to help support getting more people of color in the field. So I just wanted to offer that part.
Karima, what school district are you in again?
I'm in North Rockland Central School District.
Okay, Noelia can speak to it, but this network, the Educators of Color, one of the things we are in the process of putting together is an opportunity for our students that are in Today's Students, Tomorrow's Teachers to come together on Zoom and be able to see us, to see role models, to see people that are in various levels of education, to just encourage them, and also for them to be able to network with one another. I know a number of the students are coming on Friday to the conference, so we're really excited about that. So definitely drop your information, Noelia. Let's see if we can connect with that group of students as well. We know we have Ellenville, Kingston, Valley Central,
North Rockland School District.
North Rockland School District. Sounds great.
There's a lot.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. Any other questions out there? Well, as we get ready to wrap up, you all are in education for a reason. Just close by sharing what's your why? Why are you here? What is your why? We'll give you a minute to think about that. And for all you other educators out there, what is your why? I've been in education for over 30 years, and I feel a sense of responsibility to educate all Black and white. I remember as a third grade teacher, I had this beautiful little white boy who just fell in love with me, and he brought me hand carved figurines that his dad did, but they were white. And I used that moment as a teachable moment. I said, oh, I love this. But if it was brown like me, it would be perfect. That child took it home and made his father color it brown. You better believe that's a lesson he has not forgotten. In fact, I had his son when he started having children. So again, representation. So what is your why? We'll start with Maya. You're going into education. Why? There's so many things you could be doing.
My why is that I love learning. I love the constant process of learning about other people around me, learning about other people's identities, and being able to have that influence my own life. I love children. I love watching children grow up and watching their minds put two and two together and figure things out for themselves and connect and make assumptions and make corrections in their behavior. I love to watch the learning process, and I love learning myself. And a similar story to what you said about that little kiddo, but I recently just started working in a nursery and daycare, and there's a few Black kids in my class, but I had my hair in just 2 single braids the other day, and one of the little girls was beyond excited to see me and say, oh my goodness, Miss Maya has the same hairstyle as me today. And it was so heartwarming to just have her look at me and be like, that's a cool Black woman. That's a cool Black teacher. And look at these similarities that we have and look at how I can connect and identify with her. So that's why I'm doing it, because I love kids. I love the learning process. And I think it's amazing to be able to be a part of that journey in someone's life. And so that's what I'm sticking it out for.
Love it, love it. Tanisha, how about you? What's your why?
I was thinking, and I'm like, I have a few whys, but one that really just stuck with me is being able to provide education to students with special needs that I've been working with for the last 15 years, providing them with different ways of learning, going out of my comfort zone to find information and present it for all learners. It really brings me joy when they are accomplished something, or they have a question and they're inquisitive about things. I encourage them to speak up and to ask for help and things like that. So yeah, that's my why. It really it brings me a lot of joy being in the classroom.
Dr. Ford, what is your why? God knows you could be teaching at an HBCU.
Yes, yes. And like Tanisha, I have a lot of whys as well. You know, one of my first hurdles was the fact that am I, being true to self, being, in this space. And so then I'm gradually coming to terms with it and getting an understanding of my purpose. And that is what is driving me even more and more. And even hearing Maya and both Maya and Judy speak here, for some students, I am going to be the first professor of Black. For some white students, I'm going to be the first professor of white. For some Black students, I'm going to be the first professor of color, sorry. So I have a pretty important role, which I completely missed during my first semester here at SUNY Newport. So I have another item added to my agenda now because first impression counts. So to all my students, I have I see it as a very important task as they interact with me and as I do my best to remove any implicit biases that they may have about people of color, educators of color, and so that's going to be my driving force now to really leave a great impact on my teacher candidates.
Excellent, excellent. Marcia, what is
Hey.
your hey?
So for me, oh my God, growing up in the Dominican Republic, in a small town, my pretend play with my sister was being a teacher. I always knew that I wanted to work with children. It's the greatest love. It's what brings me the most joy. I always say I'm like a fish in the water when I'm around children, no matter what the environment, it's the classroom, anywhere. I just love children, and I'm just amazed by their wonder, by the ability of learning, of creating, and in their honesty. I always say that the purest thing we have is children. So I feel is from my heart, is my duty to guide them, to teach them so that they can grow their wings and really fly on their own, because I believe that they can do that. So it's really a love from the heart. So that is my why I have struggled all these years, and I leave one school and I leave another district, and I keep coming back because that is truly my passion. I just love children and every child.
I hear you. Before I got married, I used to say mother to none, yet mother to all, because I just feel like they're all my babies and I want to protect them. Noelia, your thoughts?
I mean, really similar to everyone else. There's a magic in teaching, and it's something that people always joke around when you're in a room full of teachers, all they can talk about is teaching, and it's because we all know that magic moment, and they might be few and far between, and you might have a school year where maybe you just have one or two, and you might have a great school year where you have a bunch of magical moments. But when you're in that classroom and somebody has that moment and you help get them to an understanding, or you facilitate that in some way, or maybe you didn't have anything to do with it, but it happened in your room on your watch, those are the moments that we live for. And all of the other stuff that we were talking about is worth it for those little pockets of magic. And I wouldn't do anything else, even though I complain,
I hear you. Tanisha, did you want to add anything else?
No, I think we covered it all. It was just, this was a really great experience, especially with being able to express like the positives, the things that we want to see change with. So now I don't have anything else to add.
There really is no end to this thing. There's a lot that we can actually continue, because as I'm sitting here, I'm thinking about the barriers to educators of color. We think about the financial aspect of things. You know, we need to find more scholarships. We need to find ways, because for so many people of color, they don't have the benefit of daddy's money, mommy's money. They're usually going to school and working at the same time because they have to. I think about the testing system, how so many of our educators of color get to the certification process where they have to sit for a test. And most of these tests, because they're written by white people, many times, they have implicit bias, and it does adversely affect educators of color. There's so many aspects to the system of education that we need to address and to come up with some solutions to be able to really impact the systemic racism that's there, that in many ways has kept many educators of color out of positions of authority, positions of power. I think about the number of people of color that are teaching assistants. Why aren't we encouraging them and making it easy for them to enter education? You know, there's just so much more that we can and should discuss, which to me says we need to do this again. So we thank each of you for giving up of your time and your bandwidth to be able to take this conversation in. And we pray that in your spaces that you will carry the conversation on, and let's come up with solutions. We need to help be a part of the answer to the woes of this world. People need us. They need educators of color. The whole world is better because we are there. So thank each of our panelists. We thank Anthony for jumping in and assisting us, and for each of you that have joined us on this evening. So with that, we're going to end this session unless somebody has a burning comment that they want to jump in. Let me open up the space. If you want to talk, just jump in.
There was one comment in the chat.
Okay.
So let me see. Raquel, did you want to ask your question?
Let's see.
So I'll go ahead. I'll go ahead.
Hi.
Oh, go ahead, Raquel.
So just as someone that's student teaching right now and is also working part-time and future teacher of color, one of my big things is making sure that, or not making sure, but talking about how to make teacher education more accessible to more people of color. And I was just wondering if there's anything that students should and can be doing on their campuses to encourage administration and just the larger community to care about this and support more people.
Maya, go ahead.
I would say opportunities like this, like the educators of color, this panel specifically and this group in general is such a driving force. And even if it's just creating conversations, it's so important. So in my opinion, or my perspective of this, is just get involved in any way you can, even if it's just showing up to a meeting once a week and being able to hear the conversations, participate in them. And then also so many things can form from that. So whether it's making relationships with people who have similar minded thinking, me, so maybe text me, but and then being able to go along with the said people and just contact administration or set up a meeting or ask them to come and join one of our educators of color meeting. So really what I would say is just get involved, talk to anyone you can, hear the ideas and the conversations going on around you. And like your voice matters. Like you asking this question proves that like you should be a part of our group. You should be a part of our conversation. So really just like get involved, get into it.
Excellent. And I think if we can have the college collaborate with community organizations, this is not an official SUNY New Paltz group, the Educators of Color Network. It's something that I started because I know how I felt when I was in the public school system many times feeling like I didn't have support, or the support was in another building. So many, many, many lonely times, I just felt a need to, again, provide a space where we can come, and if nothing else, just cry on one another's shoulder for emotional support. But again, if you are at the conference on Friday, join us for lunch. I'm not sure what room, we'll let you know on that morning. But the Educator of Color Network, we will be having lunch together and just sharing and meeting one another to, again, develop those networks that can be there to support us as we navigate these waters.
I
So-
just wanted to add something that has been a bit urgent on my spirit recently is what role can I play in increasing that pipeline for students of color, starting from the high school into, because I know there are initiatives out there, but I am doing my own little homework now to find out what role can I play to help improve our numbers in education.
Excellent, excellent. And I think that is a conversation that is going to be ongoing. We have a number of things that are coming up, and Anthony is dropping in the chat. He dropped an article, why having teachers of color, why that's important. So much to be done, so much work, so much work. I think developing a mentoring program with existing educators, so we can set up something for orientation before the students are declaring what their majors are. If they see a bunch of us and we're able to share the benefits of being in this space as an educator, that might encourage some as well. So a lot to think about, and the conversation will continue, but not tonight. So thank each of you again for coming. We just want to be able to let you know of some upcoming events. Anthony, do you have anything in the next week?
I do not have anything in the next week. We did have something for tomorrow, but it's canceled because of the storm that's coming. I know there are people out there that like snow. All right. I like last week's snow, 2 inches. I like the 2 inches. Okay. This storm that's coming, I don't want to shovel. That being said, so that has been delayed, but just pay attention to our websites, Black Lives Matter at School. And let me go ahead and put a link to that quickly in the chat.
And I know in April, we have another event specifically geared around Black educators. Jennifer Howard, who is a first grade teacher in the Poughkeepsie School District, phenomenal teacher. She is doing a training on Black educators' right. So what she's doing is she's bringing in various quotes from very famous Black educators and allowing us to write and reflect on it, and then to have some dialogue around that. So that, I believe, is the third Saturday in April, I believe. But we will share out the information and just look for us. Again, I dropped my information in the chat. My website is drpaulacperez.com. If you go under the communities link, you will see when we are meeting, and there'll be an opportunity for you to join us. So once again, thank you all for coming on this evening. Good night. Thank you all so very much. All right, stop.